Hello folks, I do have some very unfortunate news regarding Wuchang today, which we'll be covering in full in just a few moments. I was mid-data mine video editing when the news occurred, and so I've spliced that video and this video together, basically covering all of Wuchang's latest developments and why this is happening, and then we'll look at the data mined content, which I've now rewritten to appropriately match what we can expect moving forward. So, it was announced from various different sources just a few days ago that Wuchang will not be receiving DLC in any way, shape, or form. To quote this post right here specifically, Ming Lei, the Feather of Yanzhou, aka Wuchang Fallen Feathers for us Westerners, will not release DLC and will no longer touch on historical content. While known gaming influencer middle-aged player Zhang has announced that Wuchang will no longer release DLC. Zhang took a photo with Wuchang producer Xia Suyan in May of this year. Netizens also reported that the influencer recently interviewed Xia Ziyan in a live stream who stated Wuchang will not have DLC and will not touch on historical content. Now, I will be honest, this is some of the most unfortunate news we've had in gaming all year. Two of the strongest Souls-likes to emerge this year have been Kazan and Wuchang, and whilst the Kazan devs have been on strike for over 3 months, resulting in Kazan developments grinding to a screeching halt, Wuchang was subject to an absolute onslaught of negativity post-launch. From a review bombing, backlash from China, which caused aspects of the game to be changed and or censored, and then further backlash from the Western audience because of said changes and censorship. I'm saddened, but also not surprised by this outcome, now that I have processed it. I've covered Wuchang and by extension its developers Lindsay for quite a few months now, having made 5 guides and 27 news videos for the game so far. I've reported on almost every single development, and I ultimately cannot help but just feel sorry for Lindsay at this point. They emerged in 2016, released their first ever game in 2021, then released Wuchang this year, which for all intents and purposes still did very well despite its negative reception, and has put Lindsay on the map regardless. However, the impact here could have been so much bigger had none of the controversies occurred. Lindsay have very much come out of nowhere and delivered one of the biggest games we've seen all year, yet just 3 or so months after launch, it's being announced that the IP is basically dead and unlikely to receive any future DLC or sequels. I use the word dead because what we have to understand here is the game itself is not named Wuchang Fallen Feathers in China and is instead named Late Ming, the Feather of Yanzhou, which did surprise some Chinese players when the Wuchang name was revealed to the Western audience, as up till that point, they had expected historical accuracy to be one of the core components of the game, but the difference in name was a curious development. We can immediately assume that any DLC would have been connected to the late Ming period in China and likely included more prominent and real-life figures from that particular time. So, considering this is what caused the initial backlash in China to begin with, it's no surprise they've abandoned any plans for DLC. This could very well go for sequels/prequels too. The game itself is heavily influenced by and representing a specific period of time, with its very name in China literally being Late Ming. So, as easy as it may be to suggest, they could just reshape everything they have and steer away from the historical accuracies moving forward. Wuchang as a character and an IP in China itself is already established as Late Ming, and whether we like it or not, the devs likely view it as spoil at this point. Why use the success they did manage to gain to double down and reshape a project that for all intents and purposes has been staying since launch? As much as many of us would like to see them release DLC and future titles for the IP, it's likely just too risky given Lindsay's infancy and lack of portfolio. I could be wrong, and they may very well release another Wuchang title that steers away from historical accuracies entirely and does indeed give us more of this IP. However, given they're not working on DLC, and given they have an unlimited amount of safer options, I wouldn't be surprised if this is all we get for Wuchang. Now, with that said, we do still have some future content due to be released, which would be an additional 2 armors and 2 armor sets for deluxe owners on Steam, but beyond this, we have had no further news regarding anything else. It is possible that we still receive future content updates, at least on a much smaller scale than what potential future DLC could have been. As we've data mined so far, there are many unused assets regarding both PvP and co-op. However, given the recent developments, I really couldn't say whether the devs will commit to adding these in or not, or whether that was part of the original plan. The additional weapons and armor sets for Deluxe Edition owners on Steam were announced before the backlash ensued and were a gesture made by the devs in the very first weeks after launch. So the fact they are delivering on this doesn't actually suggest much for any further updates, given they are likely just honouring their word. So, damn. things do not look great, folks. The two biggest titles that I've personally had the most traction with on YouTube have been Kazan and Wuchang, two very great Souls-like games that seemingly have had their futures cut short. I don't think I'm the common denominator here, but if games do keep dropping like flies once I've begun to cover them, then maybe you can all start pointing the finger at me. I'm just trying to lighten the mood, given the extremely unfortunate news for all Wuchang fans. I will continue to cover both Kazan and Wuchang for as long as it makes sense to cover them, and should Nipol or Lindsay grace us with any future titles, it's very likely you will find me there too. Now, the data mine content is less exciting after everything we just spoke about, but it's still interesting nonetheless, and if co-op and PvP are ever included into the game, then what we have here is very likely to be how. All data mined content was found by Stray Curtis, and he has been ever so kind as to provide me with it all, so as to show it off here. So a very big thank you to him for all of the hours he put into discovering all of this in the first place. Now, first up, we have this little model of a chick that was seemingly cut from the main game. I had a lot more to say about this that no longer matters, but I do think it's a shame that we will never see the likes of this little guy in the actual game. Next, we have this circle construct that is animated to spin and is linked to an open door action. I figured this may be used for the DLC regions, as they had not been fully fleshed out, and both me and Stray Curtis could not find this within the game already. Next, we do have some of the more relevant data mined content, which is regarding both co-op and PvP. First, we have these particle effect animations coupled with the following message. As an interesting aside, the animation I'm using to apply the particle effects is referred to as blood to bullet in the game code, and using it reduces your HP by roughly 1/3, leaving me to believe it was originally intended to be used similar to Bloodborne's blood bullet mechanic. And for those who don't know, you could essentially sacrifice health within Bloodborne to gain blood bullets, and it would appear these particle effects are named in a very similar fashion. Given that Wuchang had a pistol in the original version of the game, this theory definitely lines up. However, the pistol was seemingly cut, which I do think is a shame, but as for what that means for these animations, I truly do not know. Next, we do have something really interesting, which would appear to be the cosmetic effects of allies and invaders within your own world. Allies having the yellow runes, whilst invaders have red. An interesting design choice over the typical phantom colours we've come to expect from Dark Souls and Elden Ring, and one I actually do quite like. Now, there is no confirmation that these do remain under the player when moving, but how they are coded suggests they do, which further leans into them being used for PvP and co-op, given their colours also match for what we've data mined there already, which then further reinforces just how far along co-op and PvP were in Wuchang prior to them either being delayed or cut entirely. In the previous videos, we covered how the co-op and PvP mechanics had items to initiate summoning allies or invaders, as well as an item that allowed players to invade others at will. Then we covered how servers had been created and set up, however they were not currently active, and then we saw how there was to be a reward currency for invading, as well as redeemable items and an entire messaging system very similar to Dark Souls or Elden Ring. So all in all, an awful lot of work for content that was cut and may never return. It is a nice thought to think this could one day be included, and isn't necessarily DLC, but more just a considerable free update we can all hope for. I won't delude myself or any of you into thinking this may potentially happen. It would be best if we just don't expect anything from Wuchang whatsoever moving forward, outside of what's been announced already and further performance and polishing. Instead, it is far more likely that Lindsay will take what they've managed to acquire with this Wuchang-shaped endeavour and pour it into a different IP entirely. Essentially, starting from square one all over again, only this time in a much better position. Their first game hardly did anything to put them on the map, and it's surprising they were able to endeavour into Wuchang at all before acquiring publishing with 505 Games. But to basically come right out of the gate with a debut Souls-like title as big and successful as Wuchang is quite impressive. And that is, in my own opinion, the biggest takeaway here. Despite Wuchang most likely being abandoned and receiving no further content, we can very much expect another Souls-like endeavour from the Lindsay devs, and despite their infancy and inexperience compared to much longer-standing studios, they have proven themselves very capable and are now definitely on a lot of players' radars. As I said before, I will still be providing coverage for Wuchang. However, I suspect that river will now dry up sooner rather than later. It's likely I cover Lindsay's next endeavour too, whatever that may be. Given I have now followed and researched them quite a bit over the past few months, they are one development team in particular that I intend to become somewhat of an expert on. So hopefully it is fruitful ventures from here on out, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, as a final note before we wrap up, folks, the Valor Mortis playtest goes live on Steam as of the 6th of October, being this Monday, and there's a link below for you to sign up with, so as to gain access for the 6th. It is a referral code, so simply just by using it, you will help me flag up on the devs' radar. The playtest is only available on Steam, and I'll be dropping a few videos either during or after the playtest, but yeah, check it out if you are interested. Anyway, that would be it for this one, folks. I'll be back soon with plenty more, and I do of course have a range of guide and news videos on the channel already, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.